Welcome to That Entrepreneur Life, a podcast about entrepreneurship that takes you from idea to launch and beyond. Each week, your hosts, Andrew Lees and Clint McPherson, discuss different business topics aimed at adding value to any entrepreneur's journey.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of That Entrepreneur Life. I'm Andrew Lees, and let's go ahead and kick things off by welcoming our special guest today, Steve Sims, to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Steve. We're really excited to have you on the show today. Before we get into everything and get into some questions, and talk about your experience, can you just give a quick overview of who you are and what you're all about?
Oh, hell.
It's a loaded question, maybe.
And it just, okay. So I suppose there's no money, no future, no possible, nothing to look forward to. Yeah. And then from there, I launched the world's leading experiential concierge firm as a way, quite simply, for me to kick around with millionaires and billionaires. That was the only reason I did it.
Okay.
And then 2 years ago, I released a book called Bluefishing, The Art of Making Things Happen.
Okay.
That really just looked at the down and ugly ways to actually market, communicate, brand, and how to communicate. Because in my 35 years of business, I've now worked with everyone from the Vatican, Elon Musk, Sir Elton John, Richard Branson, and more powerful people you've never heard of. It just became that I grew up as the Make-A-Wish Foundation for people with enormous checkbooks. And to give you a few of the, they're kind of like the big and wonderful things I've done. I've closed museums down in Florence for a dinner party of 6 at the feet of Michelangelo's David. And then had Andrea Bocelli come in and serenade them while they're eating the pasta. I've sent people down to the Titanic. I've had people doing drum lessons with Guns N' Roses, guitar lessons with ZZ Top. If you can think of it, but more importantly, afford it, I'm the guy who makes it happen.
Okay, that's awesome. Well, I got to say, when my businesses grow to the point where my revenue matches those experiences for me, then I know I'm going to give you a shout, because all that sounds super interesting and exciting. That's awesome. And I definitely want to get into that. I've got a couple of questions, about that. I want to dig into how you got into that, learn a little bit about why, you wanted to hang around, have an interesting network and hang around millionaires and billionaires. But I want to take it back to back to the beginning. You're a best-selling author, sought-after coach, speaker at a variety of networks, groups, and associations that include the Pentagon and Harvard. But can you take us back to when your entrepreneurial journey started, and what is it about entrepreneurship that gets you excited?
God, again, strange question.
That's what we aim to do.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. I never woke up and went, bloody hell, I'm an entrepreneur. I never had, I didn't know that. And it's bandied around now as though it's a badge of honor. And most people, quite bluntly, don't deserve to even use that word. You see, I grew up in the 80s and 90s where I didn't have social media and Instagram to tell me how inadequate my life was. So I didn't know any of these things. I just knew that I was pissed off and aggravated because I was working as a bricklayer and I was thinking, is this it? Is this my life? I left school at the age of 15, didn't go to college, went straight to the building site. And I was like, well, hang on a minute. I get up at 6 o'clock every morning. I go home at 5 o'clock every night, and I'm crapped on, I'm wet, I'm tired, I'm cut. Is this my life? And so I'm a great believer that most entrepreneurs are aggravated. We're aggravated at the way things are done until we design a better way of doing it. And to design a better way to do something, we've got to design 50 ways that fail. And so that's what it was. I grew up aggravated and pissed off that I was not going to settle for this life. So I bounced off a load of different jobs. I bounced off a load of different environments. My mum just thought I was going to go to prison because I couldn't hold down a job. And eventually I thought to myself, I'm in the wrong room. And I'm amazed how many times today people people will think, I want to do something better. And then they will ask counsel from someone that's never tried anything. You know, how many times you see someone like in a pub and you turn around and you go, oh, I'm going to design civilian space travel. And there'll be someone that'll sit there and laugh and scoff at you and go, oh, you could never do that. Well, why are you listening to them? Why are you asking them? Because they've never done anything in their life other than warm up a bar stool. So I was a great believer from an early age that I was in the wrong room. And they always say you are the combination of the 5 friends you hang around with. I always believe that you are the room you're in. If you're in a room full of idiots, you're an idiot. If you're in a room full of billionaires, it's gonna bleed, because trust me, they walk, talk, and perceive things differently. So in the early stages, I thought to myself, how can I get into that room? How can I get into a room full of affluent people that do things differently so that I can learn? Now, you've got a shortcut today. You've got a podcast, which basically gives you the rite of passage to speak to anybody. But in the 80s and 90s, I needed a reason to be in these rooms. So I started to get people into private parties and get people to the front line of something. And I had a way of being able to get them what they wanted and in turn create a need for them to talk to me. Now, I went from getting them into private parties to getting them into Elton John's Oscar party, or, you know, the fashion weeks, or the Monte Carlo Grand Prix with Ferrari. But I ended up doing all those. What I did for my clients got bigger and bigger and bigger, but it was always a Trojan horse. It was always there just for one reason, so that I could talk to some of the richest, most powerful people in the world and discover why you were wealthy and I was not. And that's what it was. And it just grew from there.
I love that. Okay. Well, I'm going to skip ahead to another question because it relates directly to that. I kind of had a suspicion that might have been, you know, a big motivation, you know, that you wanted to create a network, you wanted to get around these influential people. So I kind of had a suspicion that was part or most of the motivation, right? So my question is, what was more valuable, that business on face value or the network that you created through that business?
Network, hands down. Network. I was getting involved in deals that wouldn't make me a lot of money, but would link me and have me having hour-long conversations with royalty or with people that own things like countries. So I always was a great believer in something called R.O.R. Now, a lot of people know what R.O.R is, return on investment. R.O.R is a return on relationships. You know, a relationship can grow, can muster into something quite amazing. And it's also great for credibility. It's great for testimonials. It's great for referrals. So I always focused on the relationship. So if I'm dealing with a client and maybe there was some money in it, but it wasn't, you know, really big money, was the relationship worth working for? Yeah. And so I always focused on my network. Took some deals I should have never taken. You know, really had some tough times. There was one deal I took and I actually miscalculated it and I ended up having to spend 35 grand just to complete the deal. I had to pay 35 grand on top of what he had paid me because I had misinvoiced him. Yeah. Now, you never, ever, ever go back to someone and go, oh, I made a mistake, because that's changing your word. If I tell you I'm going to do it for XYZ, I need to do it for XYZ because my word is more important than my invoicing abilities. So I was always very, very focused from a very early age that I needed relationships. I needed a network. And from there, how do I monetize it? So that was the kind of like the second or third step, but it was always relationships first.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's so important with what we do to build a network, build relationships. You never know where a great piece of advice could come from, or whether $100,000 contract to do something could come from. So, it's super important. Now, how are you? And of course, just building relationships and friendships, and not monetizing them is great. I mean, and that's definitely, that's an important part of being human as well. But how are you able to monetize some of those relationships? You know, are there any examples of collaborations that you did with people, or you know, how did that work, and how have you been able to see sort of the fruits of that network come to play?
Well, I've always believed if they don't pay attention. So even if someone's a friend of mine and they say, hey, can you help me out with this? I say, yeah, I can. It'll be $500, you know, or it'll be $5,000, or it'll be 50 grand. And I always make people pay. Now that may sound like I'm being selfish and rude and money grabbing, but if I give it to you for free, that's your perceived value. If I make you pay $500, then all of a sudden you're like, well, I'm $500 out of pocket now. I better pay attention to this.
Exactly.
You pay attention. So I've always monetized. So friendships and charging, a lot of people have this problem. You can't charge a friend. Okay. Bull. Hell you can. If I got lawyers that are friends and I openly pay them. I got doctors that are friends and I pay them. Yeah. I'm paying you to do something for me that I can't do. That's outside of a friendship. Friendship is going out and buying beers. You know, I'm always a great believer in you should pay or they don't pay attention. And so I was always very eager to go, hey, I can do this for you. Yeah, you're going to be looking at about $2,000. Is that okay? And I'd say it like that. And they'd be like, well, if you can get it at 1,500, I'll say, all right, I'll have a look, you know, and I would do it like that. But I was always very open from a very, very early stage. And even when I got them into parties that weren't charging me, I would still go, look, I've got to look after the people that made this happen, i.e. me. And I'd say to them, it's going to cost you $500 so I can sweeten some hands. Here you go, Steve. Great. Thanks a lot. You're in at 7:00 tonight. So I've got you done. So I would always, from a very early age, make sure that people paid to get into everything. And I'm still that same way. Okay.
Yeah. I think that's a great philosophy to have. And that way there aren't, you don't get this, you know, mixing of expectations. And I mean, a lot of things, a lot of projects and the success of them come down to what are the expectations, and setting that right in the beginning is super important. I have a consulting business and product development consulting business. And if I don't set the expectations right from the beginning, it's trouble in the end. And yeah, I think that's a great point, that even if you're working with friends, they might, you know, the inclination is, I want to help them out. I want to give them something for free. But then, like you said, they might not pay attention. And you might just waste even more time than you had expected. And then that can turn into something even bigger. You know, you could really, like, you help them with one thing for nothing. And then that just grows into another thing and another thing and another thing. Oh yeah. Can you help me with this or that? So it's great to be helpful, but at the same time, I definitely agree with that.
Close the chapter out, you know, get it. I'll do this. You pay this, chapter done. That's over.
That's it. Yeah.
And you also avoid the favors. Now, favors grow in interest bigger than any mafia loan ever could. So, you know, if you do someone a favor and they don't pay, and then all of a sudden, a year later, you get people going, oh, I looked after you and I need this now. And you're like, hang on, what you did was worth $200 and what you're asking me for is $2,000, you know? And so, it's best just to go, look, you do this for me, I'll cover you that. And so I always pay for my connection. So if someone gets me through the front door, I'll help them out. I may buy them a couple of tickets or something. I may buy them dinner. I may give them some cash in an envelope, whatever. But I always conclude the arrangement from that moment.
Yep, exactly. Well, and if you're building a business and, you know, I mean, sometimes it helps to get a little bit of a boost from here or there, you know, get a little extra value maybe. But if you're getting things for free, you know, here and there, and then all of a sudden, you know, you get a couple of years down the road and you all of a sudden have to start paying for those things, you could be in trouble because you haven't worked that into your cost, and you could have just an unsustainable business, you know, so that could be really tricky from the start.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah. So you have a new book out called Bluefishing, The Art of Making Things Happen. What the heck is bluefishing? And
so It's actually been out for 2.5 years, so it's a little bit, but it's funny that a lot of people are actually discovering it now, which is weird. I've lost track of how many interviews and conversations I've had where they've gone, "Oh, you've just got a book." No, 2.5 years ago it came out, but it's been weird how it's been kind of like just trotting up. And I think COVID has been very, 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 very good for it, because I'm a uneducated bricklayer from East London that now is communicating and have friendly relationships and business relationships with some of the most powerful people in the world. So with my coaching and I've got a Facebook group called An Entrepreneur's Advantage with Steve Sims, and it's free of charge, so there's no pitch. When we communicate with people and when we communicate in their group, we allow people to see, look, it ain't pretty and it doesn't have to be pretty in order for it to work. And we openly say that if a bricklayer from London can be working with the Vatican and Elon Musk, you're already out of excuses. And so I got contacted. The story is I got contacted about 3 years ago. And because people in the luxury world knew who I was and the people I was dealing with and who were my clients, they contacted me and they said, you should write a book on the rich and powerful people you deal with. And I said to him, if I named names in my book, I'd be dead by cocktail hour. You know, there's no way in the world I could announce some of the people I've dealt with. And so then I actually did a speech, and it was an entrepreneur event on, you know, how to brand yourself, how to market, how to get your message out. And I've never been able to validate this, but apparently someone in the audience knew someone in the publishing house and said, hey, do you remember that guy you spoke about? I just saw him speak. And he never mentioned any of his people, but he mentioned how he did it. Maybe that should be the angle of the book. So they came back to me and they said, look, would you do the book on how a bricklayer from London manages to do this around the world? Because that would be interesting. That would be helpful. That would have people and action items for people to be able to change the way they live. So we agreed. And we didn't know it was going to be anything. We didn't have a website. I didn't suddenly want to sell a 50-step course and, you know, all that shit. I didn't want to be doing any of that. I did the book.
Funnel hacking and
I didn't want to do it. I wanted to do the book that was powerful to me, that hopefully would get one person out there to do things differently, create an impact before an invoice, actually focus on what they're solving rather than what they're selling, all of those things. And the book came out. In fact, I'll give you a funny little story about the video in a second. But the book came out, and for the first couple of months, it did very, very little. And I'm talking about like 400 copies. It was like crap. Fine. Why shouldn't it be? I wasn't doing a junkie show. I wasn't on all the TV news. I wasn't running around publicizing it. Never have. And then the third month, it took off. And it's been released. It's been translated and released and bestseller in Korea, China, Thailand, Vietnam, Poland. And it's just being translated at the moment to be released in Russian. So it's just blown up. And it did really, really well. Now, here's the funny thing that I said to you about the launch. When the book was about to come out, the company said to me, the publishing house, Simon Schuster, they said, look, here's $2,500, and they sent me a check. Get a table at Barnes & Noble, buy some champagne, and sign books on a Saturday afternoon in Barnes & Noble. Now, for any of you lucky enough to be seeing this on a video, who the hell is going to walk up to me on a Saturday afternoon when you're out shopping with your kids? There's no way in the world. So I went, no, not doing it. So I actually gave the check to a whiskey bar that I used to hang out in. And I said, look, I'll sign this check over to you. I'll invite a bunch of my friends. Once the check's run out, you know, alert the bell and turn the lights on and we'll leave. And that was it. And what we did was, you know, again, based on that, who your friends are, I had some pretty cool friends. I shouldn't say had. I have some pretty cool friends. So what we did was to make it a book launch. On the end of the bar, we put a pile of books. Okay. So it was now technically a book launch.
Right.
But we all got drunk, and there was a friend of mine, Sonia Hatter, and her and Cole run a big event called Thrive in Vegas. She brought along a little cameraman. And of course, cameras can be really small now. And she said, look, do you mind if we get some B-roll of the party so that for our use? Not for me, for their use. And I went, no problem, knock yourself out. What I didn't know was that they were actually secretly recording a video for me of my launch party. Now, the funny thing was, because nobody knew this, the people that were being interviewed at the beginning of the event, they were all sober. And they were like, Steve's been fantastic. Steve's doing this. I can't believe it's an honor. Blah, 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 blah.
I noticed that. Yeah.
As the night goes on, everyone's getting shit-faced and everyone's getting drunk and abusive. So she sent me this video and it's hysterical. And my book publishers, they said, you've got to put a website up. So we put a website up at stevedsims.com and stuck this video right on the front of the website. And it was hilarious. But you know, the funny thing was, people got to see who I was and who I was with and who my friends are. And it helped explode. So I'm a great believer that a lot of people try too hard and end up missing the mark. So I just put it out there. This is me. Take it, leave it, do what you want to do with it, but don't be confused.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, sometimes, and I'm guilty of this a lot, is overanalyzing things, trying to make things too complicated, trying to spread myself too thin, trying to, when I'm doing business development work, I might be trying to get on podcasts, and I'm trying to write blogs. I'm trying to do videos. I'm trying to do a million different things at one time. And sometimes it's important to just, kind of get back to basics, do your thing. It's important to record it when you can, right? I mean, to have something to show, have a record and have something that you can show, especially in video format, is in any kind of video format you can have now, whether it's long form, short form, or whatever. But I think that's important. Just be yourself and you don't script it to death. And, but I watched that video and it was hilarious, and you're absolutely right. It goes from sober to drunk in, about halfway through, and
it's abusive.
Yeah.
So if you don't like foul language, don't watch the video. But the video is a perfect example of just being as raw as you possibly can and then exposing it to the world. So when you saw that video, you had a very clear identification of who I was and what I stood for, didn't you? So it was and the kind of sarcasm I get from my friends.
Exactly. Yeah, I did have a pretty good idea of, of kind of who you are and what you're all about. And so I kind of knew, like a lot of guests that we have on the show, we have a little bit of an idea about how they're going to be, how they're going to act, but I knew a lot better with you. It was nice to be able to see that and just kind of know who I was getting. And it's fun to, have some fun too. I could tell that you like to have fun and have a laugh. So that's always very important. It's good to make sure that we're having fun when we're doing this entrepreneurship thing. I think that should be ultimately the goal, and one way or the other. So you got to have fun through the process, because it's a long process. It's not like, knock out something real quick and you're going to be a millionaire and that's it. It's a long process. So you might as well enjoy the ride.
Well, entrepreneurs, we're going to get screwed, sued, go broke, get laughed at, get ridiculed, get ripped off. That's what happens to entrepreneurs. And until that's happened to you, you're not an entrepreneur. And so that's the differentiator. We literally are those crazy loons that jump out of the frying pan directly into a volcano. We don't think, we do. And that's the path of an entrepreneur. And when we do think we're getting everything sussed, there's usually 2 seconds before we get screwed over.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. I try not to get too excited about the highs, and, you try not to get too high and not get too low, because that, when you're too low, there's going to be a high coming around the corner. And if you're too high, there's maybe going to be a correction, but at least you can learn from those things. Right. And really make sure that the next time, okay, this might happen again, but the next time I'm going to be better prepared for it. So, but it's those experiences that you can't you can't prepare for. They happen to you. You know, I've had a lot of really great clients, and I've had a couple of really, really shitty ones, you know, and it's just until you learn, you know, and then like, I have project agreements, and I'm constantly tweaking it because I learned something from one client that I'm like, ooh, I have to cover my butt on that, you know, and you go through and you have to make sure that, or I have to make sure, hey, I have to make sure that I'm more clear with exactly what I'm going to be delivering to them or whatever. So, we just jump into things and keep learning. I think that's important.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, Steve, through your entrepreneurial journey, what has been the most difficult thing about being an entrepreneur and being in business?
Understanding where you are not competent, or avoiding where you are competent. And that sounds a strange little thing to say, but as entrepreneurs, our success dictates the seat that we sit in. And that's sad, because what happens is you may be really good at designing a widget. You may be absolutely phenomenal at designing this little widget that solves these problems. But the second that it starts getting distributed, you've got to be involved in marketing. You've got to be involved in accounting. You've got to be involved in distribution, warehouses, online stores, invoicing, all of these things that you weren't any good at. But the trouble with entrepreneurs is just because we're doing it and we're competent at doing it, we think we should. Now, the trouble is entrepreneurs are unicorns. We have this horn and we are brilliant at one, maybe two things. What you've got to do is anything that you are rubbish at, get rid of. That's an easy thing. You know, I'm terrible at invoicing. I have an accounting team. I'm terrible with money. I have a CFO that looks after all the finances. We very often get people to come in and do what we're crap at, but it's that stuff that we're kind of competent at that there's the danger zone. What you've got to understand is you may know what SEO is. You may know what Facebook ads are, but you need to understand that to somebody else, that's their unicorn. Right. Just because you know how to boost an advert doesn't make you a Facebook advertiser. Okay.
Yep.
So find those things that you are exceptional at, and they're your unicorn. Find those things that you're shit at, get someone else to take that over. But find that stuff that you're competent at, and find someone else that to them, it's their unicorn that they become superior at. And that's the trouble with entrepreneurs. Most entrepreneurs, we don't know how to let go. We don't know how to discover this. We don't know how to find other people that are brilliant at it. And we don't literally know how to kind of like pass the baby. And so we hold on to everything ourselves. As entrepreneurs, we're pig-headed wankers that just decide that we can do everything brilliant. And that's usually where we start killing things.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm a big believer in having a zone of genius, and as same thing, you know, in your terms, it would be having a unicorn, or, you know, having that one or two things that you're really, really good at. So that's your zone of genius. And then you have other people who have another zone of genius that complements yours, come in and help with certain things. It's not easy, and especially not easy when you're on a tight budget. So that's, I think a lot of times, a lot of entrepreneurs in the beginning, I definitely have had to do this, is at least in the beginning, at least to kind of get the momentum going and get some traction, get some revenue coming in order to be able to have the cash flow to pay, to outsource other things. Sometimes you do have to wear more hats than maybe you're comfortable with. But yeah, ultimately you're never going to grow at, you know, the way that you should as a business without outsourcing and without getting people in other zones of genius to help you out. I love that, because then you can really focus on what you're good at, and then everything builds. And the other thing is, like I was talking to a buddy today, and he wasn't feeling too well the last few days. And I asked him how he was doing. He's feeling better. And I said, how's the business going? He said, well, it's great. I mean, even when I'm not doing anything, stuff's still getting done. So he's still getting help with writing for his blog. So that's happening. Content's being created. His page view count is increasing, whether he's working on it or directly or not. And that's where you really start to build momentum and build wealth and allow yourself
and build a company.
Exactly.
You're building a company now, taking it out of your pocket and your liability and putting it into a company that can survive when you go on holiday. How many entrepreneurs out there, and ask yourself this question, if you buggered off on holiday for a month and didn't do anything to your business, no emails, no phone calls, no social postings, could it survive? Could it survive is one thing, but could it retain its profitability? Could it stay in business? And 9 times out of 10, people are like, no, it wouldn't.
Right. Yeah. And I think until you get to that point where you really could do that genuinely, then you don't really have a sustainable business.
You don't. No, exactly.
Yeah. And you're not building value. You could, maybe you have a job for yourself, and that's actually kind of an important distinction. Some entrepreneurs are creating jobs for themselves and not really creating a business that's growing and that's building equity and that's, creating wealth for them. And that might be fine. I mean, some people really are just like, I just want to have like with my consulting business, it could just be just a job for me. And I could, not really grow it too much and be comfortable, and that's okay. But I want to grow a real big, big business. I mean, I want to grow something that grows and that, I can bring more people into it and I can help more people. And so it depends on what your goal is. But if your goal is to build a real business and a revenue, an ongoing revenue generator, then you got to be able to step aside.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You have to.
Yeah.
And it's tough though. Let's be serious. It's tough.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's not easy. But I like that. It's interesting that you distinguished between the jobs that we know we're not good at, and we're very easily outsource. And then the things that we think we can do it. So we should do it. But I think that's a good point, is that just because you can do it doesn't mean that you necessarily should.
That's the thing. And it's a tough one for people to recognize.
Exactly. Well, Steve, as we wrap up this episode, it's been awesome to talk to you. If you could only leave our listeners with one piece of advice, what would that be?
All right, let's end it with my dad. My dad was a big, thick Irish bricklayer. We're walking down the street one day. I'm about 15 years old. He's smoking like his 30th cigarette in the last hour. And for no reason, just puts his hand on my shoulder, didn't even look at me. And he said, son, no one ever drowned by falling in the water. They drowned by staying there. And then he took his hand off my shoulder, put the cigarette back in his mouth and walked off. And I remember at the time going, what the fuck was that about? Didn't understand anything. But it's rung true so many times. We can all fall in the water. We can all make mistakes. We can have a cry and a pity party for an hour. But sooner or later, you're the one that makes the choice whether or not you get up.
I love that. That's awesome advice to end on. Well, guys, I think that's a wrap for this episode. Steve, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us and adding value to what we do on our podcast.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Guys, thank you so much for listening to That Entrepreneur Life. To learn more about what Steve is working on, check out stevedsims.com. If you like what you heard today, make sure to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or any other major podcast directory. You can also find us on all the socials and on our website at thatentrepreneurlife.com. And with that said, we also want to give a special shout out to our family and friends, to include all of our listeners, followers, and subscribers. Thank you for continuing to support what we do as entrepreneurs. And don't forget to join us next week for another episode of That Entrepreneur Life. Thanks, Steve. That was awesome. That was really great.
Appreciate it. I'm glad you liked it. Glad it helped.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Very, very cool to talk to you. I love your sense of humor and your outlook. So we're just just kind of give you an idea, this will probably drop in the next 4 to 6 weeks. We're a few weeks, maybe even a little bit longer. We're a little bit backed up with episodes right now. And we'll be finished recording our episodes for 2020 in a couple weeks. But we'd love to, I'm sure Clint would love to get a chance to talk to you. So maybe there's an opportunity, next year to reconnect and do another episode, or maybe do like a follow up. What we've talked about is maybe doing like a deep dive into something very specific, that maybe 20, 30 minutes, give some like insight into one particular topic, that you want to share your insight on, and kind of give like a mini masterclass. So
no, that makes sense. Time allowing, I'm up for that.
Okay. All right. That sounds good. Well, we'll be in touch. Perfect. And I really appreciate your time, Steve.
Be good. Thanks a lot, man.
All right. You too. Take care.
Thanks for listening to That Entrepreneur Life podcast. Be sure to visit thatentrepreneurlife.com to join the conversation, access our show notes, and discover our fantastic bonus content. Don't forget to join us next week for another episode as we continue to add value. Until next time.